Okay. All right, everybody, we're making progress. Here we go. Welcome to a new video series from WWNT.com, Timekeeping. This show will attempt to chronicle year-by-year changes to the Walt Disney World Resort, from exciting new ride openings to the minutiae of a store changing names. Join us as we count down to the 50th anniversary of the vacation kingdom of the world, Walt Disney's last great dream. The story of Walt Disney World doesn't begin with its opening on October 1st, 1971. In fact, it's arguable as to when that story begins. For our sake, we'll say it truly began in 1959. That June, Walt Disney met with executives from NBC to develop a project in the New York City area, as well as move his show from ABC to NBC. By this time, Walt had already encountered problems with the amount of land and control he had in Anaheim, California, which led him to passing on the New York project. This wasn't the end of the discussions, however. Talks continued between Disney and RCA, an NBC subsidiary, about land in Palm Beach, Florida. Walt commissioned several feasibility studies on Florida, including a survey of 12,000 acres of land owned by billionaire John D. MacArthur. These talks also broke down when MacArthur simply wanted to sell a few hundred acres of land, not enough to include a community of tomorrow that Walt was already envisioning. Of course, there wouldn't be a Walt Disney World without Disneyland. The park opened on July 17, 1955, and by 1959, it was a massive hit, already undergoing its first major expansion with the addition of the Matterhorn bobsleds, the monorail, and the submarine voyage. To Walt, though, there were many problems. First was the lack of land. There was little room for expansion, and third-party hotels and attractions outglittered the area around the park. The related second matter was control. While Disney could flex its influence in Anaheim, he couldn't control what was around his property. Now, while these were deciding factors in choosing Central Florida, there were still a few other locations seriously considered as an East Coast attraction. These were centered around more established areas. In 1963, Walt was considering a site in Niagara Falls, the smallest of the proposed locations. Also in 1963, a site in St. Louis that would have been part of the same complex of the Gateway Arch was considered. This would have been a 5-story indoor park. Also in Missouri, Walt had considered purchasing and updating his old family farm in Marceline. And the NBC project actually began as a discussion of a New York area project. Funny enough, Walt even toyed with buying an existing Disneyland ripoff park in the Bronx, New York, called Freedomland, which was founded by some former employees of his who had felt wronged. Central Florida ended up being the only site that provided the amount of land that Walt really wanted, but acquiring it without significantly driving up prices would lead to the kind of operation people write spy novels about. In fact, two of the principal participants in his plan, Paul Hellawell and William Donovan, were former members of the Office of Strategic Services, the predecessor of the CIA. Using fake names, a series of law firms, and even convincing the Orlando Sentinel's publisher that the anonymity of the mysterious buyer was good for Central Florida, Disney was able to keep their involvement under wraps until most of the land had been purchased. Disney managed to purchase the main tracts of land using option agreements in the name of attorney trustees. There were even negotiations for oil and mineral rights with Tufts University in Massachusetts. Though it was often named the mysterious buyer, Disney managed to shake off rumors for a while. Proximity to the ever-expanding operations at NASA pointed to several aerospace companies as the most likely buyers. By 1965, Disney had procured 27,000 acres for under $200 an acre in the names of dummy corporations such as I-4 Corporation, Bay Lake Properties Incorporated, Latin American Development, Reedy Creek Ranch Incorporated, and Tomahawk Properties Incorporated. You can see these names listed above Crystal Arts on Main Street, USA, in a tribute to Don Tatum, who played a key role in the land purchases. That same land jumped to nearly $80,000 an acre after the project was announced. Even with the land acquired, Disney still had to figure out how it would govern the project. On June 14, 1965, a 4-day meeting commenced to decide upon the legalities needed to fulfill their goals. This included discussions on drainage, zoning, building codes, and taxation. The team, which Walt only attended for the opening and closing, focused on 2 types of legal structure, a municipality or special district. Special districts in Florida allow for more specific control of building codes and drainage of the wetlands needed to build the project. In the end, they decided on a combination. the cities of Bay Lake and Lake Buena Vista, and the Reedy Creek Drainage District, now the Reedy Creek Improvement District. Disney now had the power to build its own utilities, court system, police force, and airport, in addition to the construction-related powers it wanted. The state legislature approved the entities, and they were officially formed on May 12, 1967. However, this wasn't the end of the story. In a lawsuit that was almost a comedy sketch, the district sued the state of Florida and Disney challenging itself. This was to preempt any other court challenge and to get the Florida Supreme Court to uphold the legality of the district. The state had to legally oppose the suit, but in reality, the attorneys for the state helped to make Disney's case. And when asked if they had a rebuttal for the district's case, the attorney arguing for the state responded, quote, "Yes, sir, but I don't know what to say." Suffice it to say, the district won the case. On October 1st, 1965, Paul Hellawell announced that his mystery client would be identifying themselves at a press conference on November 15th.
There's
However,
the floor.
Disney didn't get a chance to do things the way they wanted. On October 21st, Emily Bavar, a reporter for the Orlando Sentinel, published an article, "Is Our Mystery Industry Disneyland?" Bavar had been covering Disneyland's 10th anniversary and noted that in an interview, Walt had dodged questions about the Central Florida acquisitions, yet he knew a suspicious amount about the area. The secret was out, and Disney accelerated their plans, with Florida Governor William Hayden Burns announcing the project on October 25th. The development of the project continued, as did the public relations, trying to convince both the public and politicians about the project. In June of 1966, Marvin Davis was tasked with creating the master plan for the property, laying out how the theme park, resort areas, and the City of Tomorrow, now known as Epcot, would fit into the 12-mile-long, 7-mile-wide property. These plans can be seen in the most famous of these PR pushes, known as the Epcot film, as Walt walks around the Florida Project room. 2 versions of this film were created, one for the general public and one for the Florida legislature. Sadly, this film would be Walt's last appearance on camera, as he was diagnosed with lung cancer that November and died at St. Joseph Hospital December 15, 1966. Reportedly, he was still working on his Florida project while on his deathbed. The Epcot film screened on February 2, 1967 in Winter Park as part of a press conference and press event to promote the project. If it was a spy mission to buy the land, it was a military one to build it. 2 of the principals were Admiral Joe Fowler, who had helped build Disneyland, and General William Joe Potter, former governor of the Panama Canal I and the number 2 construction man for the 1964 New York World's Fair. While land clearing began as early as 65, it was May 30th, 1967, when the large-scale reclamation project on the property really began. This first step was the infrastructure. Roads were built to get equipment in, 55 miles of canals and levees were dug, and 7 million cubic yards of dirt were moved to create the Seven Seas Lagoon and prop up the site of the Magic Kingdom. This land would allow for most of the original Magic Kingdom layout to be built on the second floor, with access corridors known as utilidors down below. These would house a lot of the behind-the-scenes facilities and allow cast to travel outside the view of guests. Of course, this was a highly unique construction project and it faced unique challenges. In addition to the 2 original hotels, the Polynesian Village Resort and the Contemporary Resort, 3 other hotels were planned around the Seven Seas Lagoon area: the Asian Resort, the Venetian Resort, and the Persian Resort. Of these, only the land for the Asian Resort was prepared and would later be home to Disney's Grand Floridian Resort and Spa. Both the Polynesian and the Contemporary originally were 12-story towers, but the Polynesian design changed before work began on the hotels in 1969. Disney contracted U.S. Steel to build the hotels using a unique form of modular construction. The rooms could be slid in and out of place for modification later, so the rooms could be built off-site for greater speed in construction. The factory sat near where Port Orleans currently sits and could produce as many as 15 rooms a day. Disney would own the land, and U.S. Steel would own and run the buildings, though there are some sources that say Marriott and Western International were to handle the operations. At this time, Disney had never run a hotel since the Rather Corporation ran the Disneyland Hotel. However, U.S. Steel fell behind and over budget. Each modular room cost was almost 5 times what was expected, so Disney bought out U.S. Steel for $50 million, which was reportedly what U.S. Steel originally paid Disney for the rights to build and run the hotels. There are different stories about the specifics of the deal termination. Some report that it was before construction ended and Disney finished construction themselves. Others say the termination was in December of 1971. It's hard to tell what the real story is at this point, but we know that some of the finishing work was done by Disney employees working until and through the last minute of September 30th, 1971, as the Contemporary opened unfinished. Of course, the rest of construction had its issues too. Actual construction began in April 1969. Originally thought to cost $100 million, the budget had already reached $400 million at that point, and there were still constant delays. Even before vertical construction began, Disney was met with strikes by the International Union of Operating Engineers, starting almost as soon as the land clearing began, with things becoming violent before the dispute was settled on February 16th of '68. Disney originally hired J.B. Allen as the contractor, as he had done extensive construction at Disneyland, but after saying he couldn't make the October 1st, 1971 opening date, he was fired and replaced with the company's own engineer, Peter Markham, and Buena Vista Construction was formed. The iconic monorail line also had to be constructed. 2 concentric lines and a spur to the maintenance and storage barn were built, totaling 6 miles of track. The beams themselves were constructed as individual spans, each 25 inches wide, up to 4 feet thick, and between 90 and 110 feet long. They were cast off-site in Oregon and shipped to Florida for installation. 4 of the original 10 Mark IV monorails built by Martin Marietta were ready for October 1st, 1971. Monorails orange, delivered April 5th, green, delivered May 20th, and gold, delivered June 15th, were the first trains to enter service on September 1st of 71. Monorail blue was the 4th train to enter service on September 20th. Disney held another 4-day event in Orlando to showcase a more finalized plan than the Epcot film on April 30th of 69. Here, models in a 17-minute film were shown to the public. Corporate involvement and sponsors were announced. And most importantly, this is when the name was officially changed to Walt Disney World. A lot of this was later seen at the Walt Disney World Preview Center, which opened on January 16, 1970, and would close on September 30th, 1971. Over 800,000 visitors passed through the center. The building still exists on Hotel Plaza Boulevard as the Amateur Athletic Union headquarters. This time period also saw Disney's first conservation area when in 1970 the company set aside 7,500 acres of the property to preserve. The opening date had been set in stone and was approaching quickly. Decisions had to be made as to what was going to open on day one and what would open soon thereafter, such as Fort Wilderness. One way or another, the resorts in the Magic Kingdom would be ready to go, even if Disney had to have non-construction workers laying sod in front of the Contemporary on the 30th of September. Thus, the pre-opening phase ended in a mad rush. The vacation kingdom of the world would officially rise from the swamps of Central Florida on Friday, October 1st, 1971. As the sun rose over Central Florida on October 1st of 1971, the management and cast of the Walt Disney World Resort braced for the expected onslaught. The fall date was planned to help manage crowds, however, newspapers and Florida Highway Patrol estimates had pushed that number into the hundreds of thousands after opening day at Disneyland ended up being an overcrowded disaster. Walt Disney World didn't have the same grand, live, star-studded opening day special. Those events would happen later in the month. On October 1st was just to be the opening day. By the end of the day, approximately 10,000 people had visited the Magic Kingdom, far from expectations. The park layout was essentially the same as we know it today, but obviously smaller. Large parts of Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland were barren land. But before they got to the Magic Kingdom, guests still had to pass through the Transportation and Ticket Center. The overall setup was similar to today's, minus the security and the Epcot platform. After paying 50 cents to park, the guests had 2 ways to get to the Magic Kingdom, via monorail or ferry. The 2 original ferries were the Port So-Called and the Southern Seas, side-wheel steamers with a 250 guest capacity. Monorails orange, green, gold, and blue were in service on opening day. Passing through the TTC, Magic Kingdom visitors would buy their tickets. There were 3 categories for tickets: child ages 3 to 11, junior ages 12 to 17, and adult for people 18 and up. An adult general admission was $3.50, but of course this didn't include ride tickets. There were also 7 adventure books that sold bundles of tickets, including admission. This book contained 1 each of the A, B, and C tickets and 2 each of the D and E tickets at a price of $4.50 for an adult. An 11 adventure book also existed at $5.75 for an adult. The individual tickets were also available in the park, with an A ticket costing 10 cents, the B 25 cents, a C ticket 50 cents, D ticket 75 cents, and of course the E ticket for 90 cents for an adult, 80 cents for juniors. As you would have passed through the turnstile, strollers were in the same location, and the shop on the west side was the newsstand. Lockers were under the train platform inside the station building. Once a guest entered Main Street USA, the town square looked very much like it does today. The Oscar Mayer-sponsored The Town Square Cafe was a place of Tony's Town Square, but the confectionery and Chef Ho were there. However, the Camera Center took up part of the current confectionery space. Next to the Town Square Cafe was the Gulf Hospitality House, which served as a secondary guest relations for Town Hall across the street. The Harmony Barbershop was on West Center Street, which divided the west half of Main Street. The corner of Center Street and Main Street housed the New Century Clock Shop, sponsored by Elgin Helbros, and the greenhouse consisted of flower carts in the middle of the street. The Emporium still occupied the front corner, but stopped before Center Street. The back half of that side of the street contained the card shop, sponsored by Hallmark, the Penny Arcade, the House of Magic, and a tobacconist. The refreshment corner, sponsored by Coca-Cola, stood where Casey's Corner stands today. On the east side of Main Street, you would pass the confectionery, the Main Street Cinema, and the Cup and Saucer China Shop. The Wonderland of Wax Candle Shop was tucked into the back of the south side of Center Street. Art stands where guests could have artwork drawn of themselves took up that side of Center Street. Along the north of Center Street, you can find Disney & Co., a toy shop, and Uptown Jewelers. Moving further along Main Street, you find the Market House, sponsored by Smuckers, and Dixie Crystals, followed by the Shadowbox Silhouette Studio and Crystal Arts. Next would be the Bakery, sponsored by Sara Lee, and the Plaza Ice Cream Parlor, sponsored by Borden. Main Street featured several attractions that can still be found today. Of course, the Walt Disney World Railroad existed at the train station at the beginning of Main Street, but at the time this was the only stop. 3 trains were in service: the Walter E. Disney, the Lily Bell, and the Roger E. Grogan. The Main Street vehicles were also in operation, featuring the fire truck, the horse-drawn streetcar, an omnibus, a jitney, and a horseless carriage. The Main Street Cinema was open, as was the Penny Arcade. There was various entertainment, including the Dapper Dans, the Walt Disney World Band, the Firehouse Band, a pianist at Refreshment Corner, a saxophone quartet known as the Keystone Cops, a Crystal Palace Trio, as well as characters on parade. Along the west side of the Central Hub area, the Baby Care Center and First Aid were in their current location. The Crystal Palace opened with the park, but was a cafeteria-style a la carte restaurant serving buffet style and was called a buffeteria. Moving clockwise, Adventureland featured nothing beyond the Jungle Cruise and the Tropical Serenade, the original name for Florida's Enchanted Tiki Room, which was sponsored by the Florida Citrus Growers. The Swiss Family Treehouse was there, and the Safari Club Shooting Arcade was in the current place of the Island Supply Company. This arcade consisted of coin-operated individual shooting machines as compared to the Frontier Shooting Gallery model. The bench design was not the lava rock we see today, but smoother concrete benches, and the foliage had not grown in yet to the extent we see now. The leaky tikis existed, but did not shoot water and faced each other in a circle, more directly in front of the Jungle Cruise entrance. Also in this area was a ticket booth. The main restaurant was the Adventureland Veranda, the current home of Skipper Canteen. The menu was listed as Polynesian and featured items such as Fiji chicken. The Sunshine Tree Terrace occupied its original location between the Tiki Room and the past fruits of Frontierland. Meanwhile, the Veranda Juice Bar was across from the treehouse in the current location of the Sunshine Tree. Adventureland Bazaar, Traders of Timbuktu Tiki Tropic Shop, the Magic Carpet, Oriental Imports, and Tropic Toppers comprised the shopping complex along the north set of buildings. The patio area here also housed JP and the Silver Stars, Adventureland Steel Drum Band. The overhang area that separates Frontierland and Adventureland was not installed yet, so the transition between the lands was much harsher. Opening day Frontierland featured 3 attractions. First was the Frontier Shooting Gallery, featuring lead pellet shooting guns, necessitating repainting each and every night. The Davy Crockett Explorer canoes boarded near the current docks for the rafts to Tom Sawyer Island. While the islands existed, they were not open for guests yet. The Country Bear Jamboree was one of the Magic Kingdom's premier attractions at the time. It was sponsored by Pepsi and Frito-Lay. The Frontier Trading Post, located between the Shooting Gallery and Country Bear Jamboree, appears to have been the main store in Frontierland. Located just past the Country Bear's entrance at another shop, Westward Ho. Country Bear Jamboree exited into the mile-long bar, a refreshment stand, and the land ended with Pecos Bill's Cafe. Liberty Square opened with the Mike Fink keelboats, the Haunted Mansion, and the Hall of Presidents. Mike Fink featured 2 boats, the Gully Wumper and the Bertha May, and loaded near the entrance to the Haunted Mansion. The Hall of Presidents was up to date with Richard Nixon as the most recent president. Blaine Gibson sculpted all 36 presidents for the cap-off to a presentation that featured the voices of Paul Frees and Dale McKinnon. The film featured the Constitutional Convention of 1787, the Lincoln-Douglas debate, and capped off with a Saturn V rocket lifting off. Royal Dano once again voiced Lincoln for the finale, just as he did at Disneyland. The Haunted Mansion exterior was vastly different. No interactive queue, no empty hearse, and not even a canopy over the queue. The inside was much the same as it would be until 2007's refurbishment. One thing to note, the stanchions for the queue and the exit were necessarily in different places, as it was the removal of these original stanchions that led to the story of the original Bride's Ring. The Diamond Horseshoe Review was also an opening day draw, and the hour-long show featured Wally Bogue at opening, as the comedian had temporarily relocated from Disneyland to get the Magic Kingdom version of the show going. The current Christmas shop area was broken up into Old World Antiques, Lafayette's Perfumery, and the Silversmith. The Heritage House next to the Hall of Presidents sold Americana. The Yankee Peddler opened in the current spot of Memento Mori. The area where the market sits today was an open field. The Liberty Tree Tavern opened as a standard a la carte table service restaurant. Sleepy Hollow Refreshments appears to have been open as a snack bar on opening day as well. Entering Fantasyland, the first thing you'd encounter would be the Skyway to Tomorrowland, taking up the area where the Tangled-themed toilets sit now. It's a Small World was in its current location, but the load and unload were on opposite sides. The location of Mickey's Filler Magic housed its spiritual predecessor, the Mickey Mouse Revue. an animatronic extravaganza featuring some of the most memorable songs in the then-existing Disney catalog. Cinderella's Golden Carousel, a refurbished 1917 carousel, opened in the castle's courtyard. Immediately behind the carousel sat Dumbo the Flying Elephant, featuring 10 vehicles that weren't wearing hats. Snow White's Adventures also opened, along with Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. Both of these differed considerably from their Disneyland counterparts. In fact, the Mr. Toad ride at Walt Disney World featured a 2-track layout. The Mad Tea Party was in its current location, but did not feature a canopy. Pinocchio's Village House served as the main quick-service restaurant, serving burgers and the like, and King Stephen's Banquet Hall was the table-service restaurant inside Cinderella Castle. The Lancers Inn served pizza in the place that would eventually become the Friar's Nook. The Troubadour Tavern, a refreshment stand, sat next to Peter Pan's Flight. There was also the Tournament Tent refreshment stand back behind Dumbo. Early shops included the Fantasyland Art Festival, located in what is now the Peter Pan Queue, the Castle Camera Shop, the Royal Candy Shop, and the Mad Hatter, between Mickey Mouse Revue and Peter Pan's Flight. Tomorrowland's opening day brought an unfinished mess. The only attractions were the Grand Prix Raceway, sponsored by Goodyear, and the Skyway to Fantasyland. None of the attractions along the main pathway from the central hub were ready. Despite its impressive entrance bordered on either side by 2 waterfall towers, there was nothing futuristic about the attraction in the land at this time. With a decor drastically different from today, the buildings were mainly white concrete and glass, in a depiction of the future that seems like an evolution of the stark style of brutalism popular in the late 8th century period. The Tomorrowland Terrace originally sat in Cosmic Ray's current location, and the only shops on opening day were the Skyway Station Shop and Mickey's Mart, which is housed in what is now the Star Traders. It's unclear if the original lunching pad, now Anti-Gravities, was available on opening day, but it did open in 1971. Hearing this list of attractions, you'll no doubt be asking where a few things you were sure that were there on opening day are. In the mad rush to open, not everything made the cut for October 1st. First to open, just the next day, was the Admiral Joe Fowler Riverboat in Liberty Square. Fantasyland saw Peter Pan's Flight open on October 3rd, and then 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea on October 14th. The Tinkerbell Toy Shop opened in November. November also saw the America the Beautiful Circle Vision 360 film debut in Tomorrowland on the 25th, and it's presented by Monsanto. Flight to the Moon premiered across the street 1 month later on December 24th. Of course, the Magic Kingdom wasn't the only thing to open on October 1st, 1971. The Contemporary and the Polynesian Village resorts opened that day as well, if not fully. Prices ranged from $25 to $44 per night. The Contemporary Resort opened with the familiar A-frame tower and 2 garden wings, with the north garden wing slightly larger than the south one that exists today. While its lack of landscaping on opening day was necessary to get the hotel open, the nearly 1,000-room resort still featured relatively little landscaping even after being completely redone within the month. The resort also featured significant convention space, even if the large convention center building was not there. There were 10 convention rooms, including names like Atlantic, Continental, Everglades, Gulf Coast, Pacific, Redwoods, Yellowstone, Yosemite, Great Smokies, and Grand Republic rooms. The 1,400-seat ballroom in the Americas was a combination of the Atlantic and Continental rooms. The convention area also featured the Hemisphere Lounge. Outside, the Contemporary featured multiple pools, a marina, 2 snack bars. The Dock Inn focused on normal fast food fare, and the Sandbar was an actual bar. The marinas at both resorts featured multiple watercraft for rent, including the infamous bob-around boats. The round team pool extended into but was not part of Bay Lake, and the square adult pool sat between the tower and the lake. The beaches were open for swimming and featured volleyball courts. Back in the Grand Canyon Concourse on the 4th floor of the tower, you can find a variety of shops and restaurants. There were several sections operating under the Grand Canyon Terrace, including a cafe and a bar, and the area is now taken up by current restaurants. There was also the Monorail Club Car Bar opposite the entrance to the monorail station. The area on the northwest quarter housed the Spirit World, a liquor store, Plaza Gifts, Sundries, and the Fantasia Shop for children. The Bay Lake side had the Contemporary Man and Contemporary Woman, as well as Kingdom Jewelers. And of course, all this existed under Mary Blair's famous mural. The original Top of the World opened with the resort as well, featured a supper club, lounge, and 2 private rooms. In addition to the regular nightly shows, it would also occasionally service host of famous acts such as Cat Calloway. The area behind check-in, now known as the Wave, was the Sunshine State Exhibitorium, featuring gaming tables. Just down the monorail track, past several topiaries, was the Polynesian Village. This opening day version of the resort featured 484 rooms across 8 longhouses. Going clockwise from the Great Ceremonial House, they were at Bali High, Tahiti, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, Hawaii, Bora Bora, and Maui. Like the Contemporary, the rooms were not highly themed, as getting them built on time was the priority. There was only the main pool that looked like a waterfall grotto. The current East Pool location was a putting green. The marina featured many of the same watercraft as the contemporary marina, with the addition of a war canoe. The beaches were also open for swimming, with a small raft slide out in the Seven Seas Lagoon. The infamous wave machine did exist and operated briefly. Like today, the Great Ceremonial House featured most of the shops and restaurants. The building did feature the grand waterfall area, but a checkered tile floor. The Polynesian Princess, Robinson Crusoe Esquire, Trader Jack's Grog Hut, News from Civilization, and Village Gifts and Sundries were the shops in the main lobby. The Tambu Lounge existed, but the restaurant it was attached to was the Papiti Bay Veranda, which featured breakfast, lunch, and a Polynesian review with dinner. The South Seas Room, which now exists as a conference space, was a buffet. The Coral Isle Cafe was the precursor to Kona. The nightly luau took place on the beach as the cove was not ready yet. Not wanting to repeat the chaos that was July 17, 1955, when Disneyland opened, Disney decided to hold off the grand opening ceremonies and filming for the TV special after 3 weeks of soft openings. Celebrities such as Jonathan Winters, Julie Andrews, Bob Hope, and Buddy Hackett descended on the property for the filming, much of which was done outside of operating hours. The special aired on October 29th. October 24th saw the opening ceremonies for the two resorts. The night culminated with a 1,000-person luau on the beaches of the Polynesian village. This was also the debut of the electrical water pageant. The 1971 version featured the sea serpent, whale, 2 sea lions, the clamshell mermaid, goldfish, dolphins, redhead mermaids, octopus, flying fish, 4 seahorses, and King Neptune. Fantasy in the Sky is also reported to premiere that night. The next day, Roy Disney dedicated the park. Walt Disney World is tribute to the philosophy and life of Walter Elias Disney, and to the talents, the dedication, and the loyalty of the entire Disney organization that made Walt Disney's dream come true. May Walt Disney World bring joy and inspiration and new knowledge to all who come to this happy place. A magic kingdom where the young at heart of all ages can laugh and play and learn together. The dedication speech was followed by a 5,000-performer Walt Disney World on Parade, which included 1,076-member marching band. When it came down to deciding what would be available opening day, the Fort Wilderness Campground unfortunately was delayed. Despite appearing on the October 29th opening special, in a rather, well, calling it outdated would be kind, comedic set of segments featuring Jonathan Winters, the campground did not actually open until November 19th.
Say hey to everybody. Bye-bye.